give an inaccurate statement just by the person that's using its intuition saying, if I tell the truth, it'll be bad. So the higher levels pick up on that and throw out a different scenario that isn't the truth.
It's in a sense the feedback loop gets dirtied somewhere along the line by exposure.
And that's why those pieces of technology should have never been used by humanity in its current level of understanding. Because for all intents and purposes, the technology doesn't work right when we use it.
Right. I totally get that. Okay, so to get back to Looking Glass and possible futures that they do converge, and the notion of, is there anything else that you can tell us, that you would want to tell us about that and the rest of the laundry list of sort of information that you had direct to either for yourself or through someone that you had vetted?
The biggest cherry on top of all this conversation would be a synopsis to say that if I could convince everybody out there that for all intents and purposes, what we believe to be true eventually becomes true. If somebody convinces us that a major disaster is going to happen in the very near future, a major disaster happens in the very near future. If we don't buy into that fear and accept that there is really nothing that we know is going to happen, and accept of whatever happens, that makes the convergence of the timelines happen as naturally as possible. Any attempts to try to go away from this one inevitable conclusion, I again see as a new beginning, an end of this reality, the beginning of something that we can't even possibly understand based on the level of our beliefs currently. But when all that information comes flooding out, there's going to be no denying what's true and what's a lie or what's illusion. We won't have the choice to believe that 9/11 happened because of a bunch of terrorists, because we'll know exactly what's happened. Basically, what we're experiencing right now is two master chess players sitting at the board. And one of them looks down at the board and sees that he's in checkmate in 7 moves. And he looks across at his opponent, and he knows that his opponent sees it too. So there's no getting out of it. So at this point, the loser can only prolong the game. The game, both players know the game is over. It's only a matter of time before he does this, and then you're forced to do this, and then he's forced to do this, and eventually checkmate. We, as a race, if we could understand that the game is over, that based on the rules of the game, the bad guys have already lost, the good guys have already won. Yes, there's moves left on the table, but those moves are being forced by the player that is going to win. The only way that checkmate can't happen is if the player that's winning makes a mistake. But from all of the information that I've gathered, all of the information that's been given, all of the information that's been vetted to me, it seems pretty obvious that the good guy player on the side of the chessboard knows exactly what has to be done to win the game. And so at this point, any mistake would be all but impossible. But again, you really have to understand the game to know that the guy that's losing is lost. And I'm sure most people sitting watching the chess match between two advanced chess players know the game's over long after the two players know it's over, because they can't see the board and see that there's only 7 moves left.
Okay, but when we come to this convergence, and again, you've seen, or the looking glass has seen, up to that point.
Now, let me say why I believe that it comes down to one inevitability, is because I was entrusted in getting it down to 2 possibilities. And I've heard both of those possibilities talked about in massive proportions, the good and the bad.
Okay, do you want to talk, so can you, in one sentence, say what the good was and the bad was, or are you able to do that?
To most easily put it to people,
I suppose.
one scenario is what most people would understand to be ascension, or an evolution of consciousness that brings us out of the cocoon and turns us into a butterfly. Timeline 2 is some kind of major global catastrophe that drives most of us underground and leaves a few of us on top to fend for ourselves.
Very well put. Okay, so I would imagine, and you can...
But I would also like to point it out that they call Timeline 2, Timeline 2. It seemed very odd to me that even back then it was identified as not 1. And that
Okay.
one
is the
didn't
ascension
get
one.
talked about.
Okay, but 1 is the one that involves what in essence would be ascension, or moving into, from the cocoon to the butterfly. Okay, but I believe, based on what you're telling me, that they would have used a lot of people like you that had a proclivity for being able to see the future, to be what is a sort of an advanced psychic remote viewer, whatever you want to call that, and looking glass, to posit these potential futures, to go up to that point and to view it, and that you're just one of many. Wouldn't you agree?
I would agree. And back in 1991, when I began my little adventure in the military, I would say that it was pretty obvious that there wasn't very many of us. However, you go 20 years into the future, and you find out that it's coming to the point where there's a lot of people that have that ability, that are inherently realizing that ability, and are able, through some unknown extraordinary means, to develop that ability inside themselves without any outside help or assistance. And it's quite obvious that as far as advanced intellectual abilities, as far as simple intelligence levels, and cognitive skills of the human race has increased exponentially in the past 20 years. And people that were 10 years old in 1991 are now 30 years old and fully awake and conscious of this burning inside that says, I am a lot more than what I see in the mirror.
Absolutely. Okay. I do have a question. in regard to what the military-industrial complex has been working on. Because with the knowledge that you say they have, assuming that they have this level of knowledge that you're talking about, right? In other words, of the timelines converging and the fact that there was going to be something. And I don't know if you saw the movie or the TV show Fast Forward. I mean, but there's been so many possible, scenarios in that regard. But one of the things that goes on is they are very busy building underground bases, supposedly underground cities. And so they seem to be hedging their bets for the negative timeline and putting their emphasis there. And would you say that that is because why would somebody want something negative to come true? Well, of course, the Illuminati have a program that they're working on in that regard. But basically, the sort of well-meaning military that just goes after contingencies, and is just working towards a future that they want to prevent or deal with when it comes. Can you explain why they have been hedging their bets to such a degree on the negative?
It's very simple. They're insane. And beyond insane, they have literally deluded themselves into believing that they can somehow manage to get away with what they're trying to get away with. There is a distinct lack of reality in that thinking.
Okay, what about the notion that CERN, for example, is engaged in trying to beat that game, as you call it?
I would say, look at the problems CERN has had. The crazy little things that have kept that project from moving forward. Certainly, they have never even come close to getting that project to the level that they want it to be to do what they really want to do with it.
Okay, well, what about the notion that that's the party line, that they haven't been able to do so? But if you really think about it, that's what they would prefer people believe so that they don't think that there's a threat.
But when you listen to the interviews of the scientists that are working on the project, even they say that it seems like somebody or something from the future won't let them get that project done. And the craziest little things have caused massive damage to that project. And when you get the foremost thinker in string theory saying, yeah, I don't think we're going to do it because I don't think fate wants us to do it, that says something about a scientist.
Okay, so, well, thank you very much. I think that at this point we're going to have to close this down unless there's any other things that you think that we haven't covered or that we could possibly touch on that you want out there.
No, I don't think we'd get any further tonight. Certainly, from what I know, the questions will come out, and be more than happy to do a live feed after that and answer any questions that anybody comes up with from this interview.
Wonderful. All right. Well, thank you very much, Bill Wood, for your service to humanity.
Well, hopefully I can get everybody else working towards that goal as well.
Absolutely. Well, apparently, regardless of which way they work, the convergence will happen.
Yeah, there's a certain element of pain that we can reduce by just not accepting that we don't have choices in the matter. And sitting back and waiting for the aliens to fix everything isn't going to help.
Absolutely.
If we are inevitably coming to a rising consciousness, we should start trying to elevate our consciousness as fast as humanly possible and make that transition a lot easier when it comes.